Chapter 1. The Operating System Nobody Gave You. Every single decision you make, what you tolerate, what you walk away from, how you treat people when nobody's watching, what you do when life gets genuinely hard, is being run by a set of beliefs you probably never consciously chose. They were handed to you by your parents, your culture, your school, your early experiences, the people who told you who you were. And you've been running on that programming ever since, largely unexamined, making choices that feel like yours, but are mostly just inherited defaults. That is not a criticism. That is the human condition. Every person alive is running on code they didn't write. The only question that actually separates the people who live with intention from the people who just drift, is whether you are ever going to sit down and rewrite it deliberately. That is the purpose of building a personal philosophy. It is the act of deciding consciously and on purpose what you actually believe about how life works, what matters, how to treat people, how to handle failure, and what success means to you specifically. Writing it down so clearly that it becomes a system you can actually run your life on. Not borrowed wisdom, not inherited defaults. Yours. Built by you, tested by experience, refined over time. Today, I'd like to walk you through how to do that. Not the abstract version, the real one. The one with steps you can start on today. Chapter 2. Why most people will never do this. Before we get into the how, I want to spend a moment on why almost nobody builds a deliberate personal philosophy. Because the reason is more interesting than you might think. It's not laziness, and it's not that people don't care about living well. It's the whole idea of sitting down to build a philosophy sounds either intimidatingly academic or dangerously arrogant. Like you'd need a philosophy degree to do it properly. Or like deciding what you believe is some kind of presumptuous act reserved for people who earned it through enough suffering or achievement. Ray Dalio, who built one of the most successful investment firms in history from a 2-bedroom apartment with nothing but a clear set of principles, had a completely different take. He argued that every single person already has a philosophy. You already have beliefs about how things work, what's fair, what's worth pursuing, what failure means. The only difference between someone with a deliberate philosophy and someone without one is that the deliberate person has theirs written down, examined it, tested it against reality, and refined it. The accidental philosopher is just running the same unexamined defaults on repeat, often wondering why the same problems keep showing up. Dalio recommended writing down the criteria you use to make a decision, and then when an outcome occurs, reflecting on how well those criteria worked. Over time, that process of documenting and refining becomes a personal operating system, and the beautiful thing is that it's available to everyone, not just billionaires. You don't need wealth or credentials or a certain kind of life experience to do this. You just need the willingness to look honestly at what you actually believe and to be ruthless about whether those beliefs are serving you. Chapter 3. Start with what you can't control. The first pillar of any personal philosophy worth building comes from the oldest philosophical tradition, specifically designed for real-world use: Stoicism. Marcus Aurelius was arguably the most powerful man on earth for nearly 2 decades, commander of armies, ruler of empires, mandator in plagues and wars and political trail all at once. And throughout all of that, he kept a private journal. Not a record of his victories, a working document. A place where he wrestled daily with his own principles, challenged his own assumptions, and held himself accountable to the philosophy he was trying to live. Meditations is our journal, and has survived 2,000 years because the problems it was written to address haven't changed. The central idea Marcus kept returning to is the one that anchors every serious personal philosophy: the dichotomy of control. There are things within your power, like your thoughts, your responses, your choices and efforts, and there are things outside your power, other people's behavior, circumstances, or luck. A philosophy that doesn't make this distinction clearly is a philosophy that will break under pressure, because it will hold you responsible for things you cannot control, and blind you to the power you actually have over the things you can. The practical first exercise: take a piece of paper and draw 2 columns. On one side, write everything in your current life that is causing you stress or frustration. On the other side, sort each item into what you can, influence, and what you cannot. Then write a principle for each. What you commit to doing about the things you can't control, and what you commit to releasing about the things you can. That is not a journaling exercise. That is the first page of your philosophy. Chapter 4. Know what you're living for. Marcus Aurelius gives you the framework for navigating daily life. Viktor Frankl gives you the foundation beneath it. Frankl survived the Nazi concentration camps and came out the other side with one of the most important insights ever articulated about the human condition. Meaning is not found. It is chosen. The people who survived the unimaginable weren't necessarily the strongest or the most physically capable. They were the ones who found a reason, purpose, a person or a future that they were holding on for. And the ones who lost that reason lost everything else shortly after. Has argument, and I think it's the bedrock of any serious personal philosophy, is that you need to know what you're living for. Not in a grand cosmetic sense necessarily, but in a specific, honest, personal sense. What are you here to do? What do you care about enough to suffer for? And what would make the whole thing feel worth it when you look back? Most people have never answered those questions directly. They have vague intentions to be successful, to be happy, to be a good person. But intentions without specificity are just wishes. A personal philosophy requires you to be concrete. Not, I want to be successful, but success for me means having genuine freedom over my time and doing work that I find meaningful, even if it pays less than the alternative. Not, I want to be a good person, but the specific qualities I am committed to embodying are honesty, loyalty, and the willingness to tell people hard truths with kindness. The exercise here is to write 3 sentences that begin with I am here to, not what you want to achieve. What you are here to do, be, and contribute. Write them in present tense as if they're already true. These sentences become the North Star of your philosophy, and everything else gets measured against them. Chapter 5. Let your hard choices reveal you. Here's something that philosopher Ruth Chang said in a TED Talk that I haven't stopped thinking about since I heard it. When we face a genuinely hard choice, a real fork in the road, where neither option is clearly better, most people treat it as a problem to solve. But Chang argues it's actually something far more valuable. Hard choices are the places where we get to decide who we are. When the 2 options are genuinely close, when no spreadsheet or pro-con list will settle it, the only thing that can resolve it is your values. And if you don't know your values, if they're vague and inherited and unexamined, you will make the choice badly. Or not at all. Or you'll make it and spend years wondering if you chose wrong. But if you have a written philosophy, a clear set of principles that says, here is what I believe, and here is what I prioritize, my choices become almost straightforward. Not easy, just straightforward. The answer becomes obvious, not because the situation is simple, but because you know exactly who you are and what someone like you does in this situation. Dalio built this into his entire approach to decision-making. He wrote his principles down, not as abstract values, but as actual decision rules. Not, I value honesty. Instead, when I disagree with someone, I say so directly and specifically, regardless of the social discomfort. Not, I believe in growth, but when I make mistakes, I document what happened and what I would do differently within 24 hours. The specificity is what gives it teeth. So take your hardest reoccurring decision, the kind of situation you keep facing and never feel good about how you handle it. Write the principle that would have made the right answer obvious, then write the next one. That's how your philosophy gets built. Not in one setting, but one hard situation at a time. Chapter 6. Steal wisely, then make it yours. Here's something I want to be direct about, because I think it's important. You don't build a personal philosophy from scratch. Nobody does. Every person who has ever developed a serious, coherent way of living has done it by reading widely, encountering ideas that didn't expect, finding frameworks from other people that resonated, and then adapting those frameworks to their own experience and testing them against their own life. Marcus Aurelius built his philosophy on Epictetus. Frankl built his on Nisus and Adler. Dalio built his on everything he ever read about how successful people thought, and then stress tested them all in the market over 40 years. The originality isn't in the raw material, it's in the synthesis. It's in how you take an idea from wildly different sources and forge them into something coherent that is genuinely, specifically yours. Jimimendo Ngozi Adichie gave a TED Talk about the danger of the single story. The idea that when we only encounter one perspective, one narrative, one way of seeing things, we inevitably get a distorted and impoverished picture. The same is true of the philosophies we build. A philosophy built entirely from one tradition, one thinker, one culture of one period of history is a single-story philosophy. It will have blind spots the size of continents. So read widely and deliberately. Dip into Stoicism and existentialism and Buddhism and whatever else calls to you. Read people you fundamentally disagree with and try to steelman their position. Find the best possible version of the argument you think is wrong, because a philosophy that hasn't been challenged isn't a philosophy. It's just a comfort blanket. The goal is a set of beliefs that have survived contact with the strongest opposition you can find, and still held. The exercise? Identify 3 thinkers or traditions you've never engaged with seriously. Spend 1 week with each. Then write 1 principle from each that you want to incorporate into your own framework. That's 3 new bricks in your foundation. Chapter 7. Write it down, then live it. Here's what I want you to walk away with today as an actual action, not just an idea. Open a document, not a note app, a real document or paper, and call it something that means something to you. Your name, your philosophy, whatever signals that is this series, then write 4 sections. The first, what I believe about how life works. 3 to 5 sentences on your core view of reality, human nature, and what actually drives outcomes. Be honest, even if it's uncomfortable. The second, what I'm here to do. The 3 sentences you wrote earlier in present tense about your purpose. Keep them specific. The third, how I commit to treating people. 3 to 5 principles about honesty, loyalty, conflict, and the standards you hold yourself to in relationships. Not the standards you wish you held, the ones you are actually committing to from today forward. The fourth, how I will handle failure, pain, and uncertainty, because a philosophy that only works when things are going well is not a philosophy, it's just optimism. Write down specifically what you believe about suffering, setbacks, and the long game. Make it something you could read on your worst day and find actual steadiness in. That document is version 1. It will be wrong in places. Parts of it will change as you live and learn and get surprised by yourself in the world. And that's not a flaw in the process. That is a process working. Darley revised these principles for decades. Marcus Aurelius was still wrestling with his in his final years. The goal is to not finish philosophy. The goal is to live it. One you return to, challenge, update, and deepen as your experience grows. The people who live most deliberately aren't the ones who figured everything out. They're the ones who never stopped examining, who kept opening the document, who treated their own beliefs as something worth thinking seriously, rather than just something to act from unconsciously. Your operating system has been running on defaults long enough, and it's time to rewrite it. Open that document today.